I like to play with images, so you're going to see some of my play electronically as well as what's around you. Images and icons of mothers and grandmothers around the world. Recently, the Dalai Lama in Vancouver said the world will be saved by Western women. Time magazine has a whole issue on American women and the changes that have happened in the last 40 years that I've been part of witnessing. And last week,
more powerful, less happy.
President Barack Obama said, pay some attention and listen and understand to the incredible juggling act that moms are going through every single day. In every deliberation, we must consider the impact of the seventh generation, the great Law of the Iroquois. And this is a Haudenosaunee council seated. The image is an artist's image from the internet. And I followed it with an image of the tree, but I was trying to get within my time, and so I shortened that. May you be born in an interesting time is an ancient Chinese curse. And all of us in this room have been. I am now about halfway through my 8th decade.
Wow.
And so, right. I was born in 1935 during the Great Depression. So the changes that I've seen in my decades of the way women are working in the world is greatly different, and I will witness some of that as I go along. So these are my mothers. These are Mutti's Matriarchals. My heritage is German from Russia. My family were immigrants coming from Russia, going to there from Germany with Catherine the Great. They came to the Great Plains as farm labor. They worked in the beef fields. So my grandmother there with a babushka is the 5th generation back. The next woman standing to my, would be on the left, is my little mother. She was 4'10". She was one of 10 children that my grandmother had. They worked the beet fields. My mother understood that she wanted to become educated. So she became a teacher, and she was a linguist. And I was fortunate to be born into a family that valued education. My 2 daughters are up there with me. They are both in their late 40s, and they are doing one daughter is doing cutting-edge research on the effects of drugs in women. She's a psychiatrist, and all the studies that had been done for years, guess what, were on men. And she's doing them on women. Then, in addition to those matryoshkas representing my own heritage, we've been a politically active family. My mother actually ran for the state legislature in 1944 during the World War. And so here we are marching in Washington, D.C., 3 generations for women's choice in 2004. I am teaching my grandchildren by example that they need to be involved in community and political activities to make sure that their rights will continue beyond while I'm around to defend them. I actually live on my grandparents' land. This is rather a unique situation in Colorado. So for 80 years, we've been on this land. And it is called Alice Acres. That was my mother's maiden name. My studio is made out of rammed earth. I literally live in and create in Mother Earth. So, I read The 7 Daughters of Eve. I highly recommend it if you have not read it, because Brian Sykes, a geneticist, through the mitochondrial DNA has traced us all to the first black mother in Africa. I decided I wanted to know what my mitochondrial DNA was, since there's quite a few females in my mother line. So I sent in to Oxford Ancestors and got a swab of my cheek, sent it back, and I found out my mitochondrial DNA goes back 17,000 years to the Arno Valley of Italy. We all are descended from the same black mother of Africa. So let's look at some ancient mothers. In the Sinai Desert at Har Kharkoum, there are circles of stones that have been dated from every place to 50,000 years to almost 1,000,000 years. But human beings seem to, in stone, want to tell their stories. And that's what survives, obviously, because it is so indestructible, mostly. In South Africa, Blombo's cave, 75,000 years ago. This was an archaeology magazine last year. There's evidence that modern human beings at that time, and it wasn't Homo sapiens, made jewelry out of shells because they were drilled and strung, and then markings in rock art on red ochre. So we have that pattern of vulvas that Lucia Birnbaum talks about in Africa on stone in red ochre. The Akulian goddess is hanging here. She was discovered in the Golan Heights in the 80s. She is dated 233,000 to 800,000 years ago. She's made out of volcanic Akulian stone is how they date her. She has marks on her that carved her. When I found her, I went, wow. And she had to become one of my ancient mother banners. We're more familiar with the Venus of Willendorf, who last year celebrated her 100th birthday of her discovery. And for the 100th birthday, the Austrian government put out a three-dimensional holographic stamp with Venus on it. She actually sits in a shrine room in Vienna, in the Historische Museum, and they've placed her in there since 2000, so that she's on, you go into a room, and it's all black velvet, and she's focused in the center and revolves on a pedestal, and mirrors show you all sides of her. And then last fall, the Venus of Hohlefels was found in Germany. The minute I saw her, I went, wow, she has to become a banner. And what's so fascinating with her is that I think she has language incised on her side. And I've emphasized that a bit, but only the side view shows it. But there are chevrons and double lines. So I'm sure someone will take this into that whole early script language of Maria Gimbutas. In archaeology, in rock and in stone, we have the oldest remnants. So I wanted to see the world's first temple, which was described by both the Smithsonian and the archaeology magazines last fall. It's in eastern Turkey at Göbekli Tepe. It's been dated 9,000 to 10,000 years ago. So it's over, depending on how you want to date it, 12,000, 13,000. Humans took a lot of time and energy to cut these stones and create circular structures on the top of a mountain. Göbekli Tepe means navel mountain. And this oversees the plain of Haran, where Abraham came from. I visited there. It's just above Syria in eastern Turkey. It's not easy to get there this year. And in all these articles, this figure was never mentioned. So I wrote the archaeologists and the Smithsonian and said, why not? And they said, we gave the information to whoever wrote the stories, but we have no control over how they're published. I suspect that because this hopper birthing figure, who was found between two lion pillars where the arrow is in this rock art area, was considered too pornographic to be published in the United States.
It was Archaeology magazine?
Yes, and the Smithsonian. And I communicated with Klaus Schmidt, the archaeology person. So I went to Eastern Turkey. Miriam Roberts Dexter came with me, and in the Sanliurfa Museum, we see this figure, 6 feet tall, labeled a man. Both Miriam and I said, that's a Sheila, that's a displaying female. And Miriam has a new book coming out soon in January that it's about displaying females around the world, trying to, again, tell the story of where we come from. It's not shameful. Judy Chicago got in great trouble with all those vaginas on her dinner party. And we need to acknowledge this and claim it. I have a long relationship with Turkey, actually almost 20 years. Çatalhöyük is another culture there that you can study. And the Turks call this figure found in a grain bin Ana Tanrıça, Mother Goddess. The site was discovered by a Britisher. It still retains its authority with the British premier on the archaeology world with Ian Hodder at Stanford. And he is trying to change the language. He won't call her Ana Tanrıça much. So his research and his teams emphasize that it is the goddess.
You want to mention the one on the left, the new one?
The one on the far left, you're right, if you're looking at it, is a wonderful one that was found 3 or 4 years ago. On one side, she's very pregnant, and on the other side, she has her skeleton. So it's both birth and death. And then the one in the middle is a bear stamp, whom they're calling a bear. But some of the figures at Çatalhöyük in that birthing position have bear heads. Maria Gimbutas, when I found her in the 80s, really clicked for me because I needed a framework for the research that I was doing as an artist and art historian teaching art history with absolutely no images of women artists in the art history books in 1980. So I find her about the same time. I began collecting those images, teaching with the images, and that changed the whole university where I teach so that they finally have women artists and women's programs. And now, next month, they're going to dedicate a room in my name for women artists. I used Eleanor Dayton's book many times in teaching. And she says the goddess is a symbol of empowerment for women, a catalyst for earth spirit-based spirituality, a metaphor for the earth as a living organism, an archetype for feminine consciousness, a mentor for healers, an inspiration for artists, the emblem of a new peace movement, and a model for resacralizing women's body and the mystery of human sexuality. And Eleanor said that a good 20 years ago, Eleanor. I've been to several of these conferences where we discuss the meaning of all these terms. Mater, matriarchy, matriarchal studies, matrilineal, matristic, matrica. In Luxembourg, in 2003, the banners hung in the Congress Hall. In San Marcos, Texas, at San Marcos University. Max Dashu's come up with this term for calling it matrica, and I rather like it. Being in the beginning mother, maternal ancestor, life force, life giver, and cultural founder of living matrix cultures. Max is doing something rather remarkable. She's teaching about goddesses and her research online. You can, in active time with her, go on and be in a classroom. I highly recommend you going to her website and exploring that. The universe is really made of stories, not atoms, and we've heard that over and over here. It's who's telling the story that's critical. So here's Mnemosyne, the mother of the muses. She is remembering her story. Women have to tell it, men can't. There absolutely was no way that men 100 years ago or 50 years ago writing the books could tell women's story. That's why the women's movement has been so wonderful for getting that information out in academia and around the world. Myth is both his story and her story. And her story has a real connection to Turkey. I went there 20 years ago, in 1990, met some fabulous people, and I've watched the country change drastically. In 1995, I had an exhibition at the Celsus Library for the month of July, where these banners, and there were only 18 at the time, hung, as 7,000 tourists a day went through to hear or see the goddess story. I'm convinced that I got the exhibition there because my name is Lydia, and this was the ancient kingdom of Lydia. In the beginning was Mother Sun, great mistress of nature, an ancestral mother of all beings and her daughters. So in rock art, we can see Ine Mother Sun from Siberia, in Guadalupe, Sun Woman from Australia. She is there now for a goddess conference next weekend. Amy of Loch Crew in Ireland, and the Great Mother Matriglyph in Utah. My gift is to show that there are so many similarities in the cultures of the world in the way they create images, sacred images of the divine feminine. Malta, stone temples built in the shape of the bodies of the goddess. The Mesopotamian crescent, which we were talking about a little bit with Göbekli Tepe, has Namu, the mother of all. She's Inanna's grandmother. And then Asherah of the Canaanites. Arena, the sun goddess of the Hittites. The Hittite cultures went from Turkey through the Mediterranean, and some of their queens and princesses ended up marrying into Egypt. And then the Greeks come along and have many temples to their goddesses and gods. In fact, there are many more, really, in Turkey to the goddesses. So this is the Hecate Temple at Lagina, where the Amazons are depicted. And as I go around to these places, I leave these small prayer flags. Some of you have seen them and purchased some of them at these sacred sites. So here we are leaving the Hecate prayer flag at the Hecate Temple in Lagina. I visit the sacred sites to get the energy into the work and leave my work there to further spread the energies. Egypt, what a phenomenal culture. And here we have Nut with the sun. She births it every day and swallows it at night. Sekhmet with the sun, the heat of the sun. Egypt is hot. And then Isis, who becomes the prototype for the mother and child in the Christian tradition. The Virgin Mary. This is a Coptic Virgin Mary, so she's still an Egyptian version. And I have a whole series of Black Madonnas tracing them back to Isis of Egypt. The Aquaba banner is hanging here, and this is another Coptic Ethiopian Mary. from that crescent, that Turkish area, Anatolia, and this by now is the Roman Empire, the Delphic oracle tells them that they have to bring the great mother of Ida from Turkey to Rome in order to beat the Carthaginians. So Cybele of Anatolia, who has been the great mother there for 500 years, is brought to Rome, and she becomes Magna Mater. She becomes the Roman great mother. She's on the peace altar of Augustus in Rome, and from the Roman Empire then spreads out all these mystery traditions. The Anatolian one, the Delphic, Dionysian one, the Isis ones, and eventually Christianity becomes the dominant one with Constantine. So as the Romans spread their robes, they also spread their images. In Northern Europe, there are a number of triple goddesses. So you have the mother, the daughter, and the grandmother. This is a German one. Those evolve into the Christian mother and child, Virgin Mary. These are from Chartres and Montserrat in Spain. And in the center is Saint Anne. She's from Chartres. She's holding the Virgin Mary, and she has her book to teach Mary about life. Saint Anne is the patron saint of Quebec, and one of the largest cathedrals in the Northern Hemisphere. So it'll be coming up next. These images are of other images of Saint Anne, particularly in Northern Europe. And in Germany, they actually go back one more, and they call her, the grandmother of Anne is Ermentia. So this is the Basilica in Quebec. I've not visited, but I found all this on the internet. And because we were in Canada, I felt like I needed to have some connections here with the goddesses. Okay. At the Smithsonian, on a wall, is this saying: "Our elders have created for us a sacred way of being in the universe. It is our responsibility to pass this understanding on to the next generation." The Native Peoples Museum in Washington at the Smithsonian is a fabulous place. Very interactive, and please go visit and see the visual traditions and the working ritual traditions. They usually have some group in there doing sacred ritual. So here are some of the mothers from this area, from the Western Hemisphere. Our grandmother Abuela from the Olmecs, Veracruz. Atabe, the Taino culture from Puerto Rico. This was the first group that Columbus met. The Mayan culture of Ixchel. Grandmother Ixchel is pouring the waters of life out on one side, and Ixchel on the other side is holding her husband, her partner, Itzama, and her son, Kukan. Pachamama of Peru. I was really fortunate to be invited to do an exhibition at Machu Picchu where my banners hung on the stones for Weizak, the moon in May. And then in the southwest, we have Corn Maiden, Crow Mother, and Grandmother Spider Woman. Grandmother Spider Woman's holy ground is in Canyon de Chelly in Arizona. The center of Canyon is a Spider Woman rock, and she creates the universe by taking 4 colors of clay, putting them in her mouth, mixing them with her saliva, taking them out, putting them under her cloak of creative wisdom, and singing them into being. Our grandmother, Old Woman Who Never Dies, is from the center part of the U.S., from Arkansas. And there's a whole tradition of these figures at the Smithsonian in Washington. the Salish grandmother from the Northwest, and Sonequa grandmother who scares the children with her wind to behave and not get lost from Vancouver. But the goddess of the Americas is Guadalupe from Mexico City. The people who have immigrated north from Mexico have brought Guadalupe with them, so she is all over the Southwest. She's slowly making it to the East Coast. And her image miraculously appeared, and it is visited by millions and millions at her temple. It's really the eternal maternal that we're seeing in art. And mothers and grandmothers, and that eternal maternal, teach, listen, respect by example, teach responsibility, the ability to respond, to appreciate and say thank you, and we've heard much about that. They juggle a lot. They eat, love, and play, and teach compassion, which means with passion, calm passion. So here are just a few more. Nantai of China on the South China Sea. Shiwangmu of the Great Western Mountains, where you go to be reborn. Tara of Tibet, and Palden Yamo, the Dalai Lama's protectress. He left with that only image when he left Tibet, and she goes with him always. A fierce old woman, cutting through ignorance with her sword. The Maori tikis. Maori peoples were buried in these shapes and put out to sea in caves. And then I found this Maori Black Madonna at the museum in New Zealand. It was dedicated to a church there who rejected it, and it ended up in the museum. India, Kali, another fierce, fierce grandmother. Parvati, the younger. Dewi Shri, the rice goddess of Bali, and Amaterasu of Japan. There is a shrine in Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon, where I was fortunate to go with some of my family. It's a room of mothers. One side has mothers to protect you, and so you take offerings to them for things that you might want protection for. And on the other side are rooms of the mothers are where you take offerings for thank yous. And then the mothers across the front are the great mothers who are overseeing the process. So this is a women's shrine in the big city and very heavily visited. The two most important things in life are love and work. And I'm amply surrounded by infinite quantities of both. This is my family. I'm the matriarch of this crowd. There's 39 of us. This is 5 years ago, so most of them are getting to be taller than I. Okay. And every year I have my own 6 grandchildren to Camp Yaya, which is what they call me. I've been doing this since they were born. So they're now, oldest are 16. So they come into my space, into my studio within Mother Earth and play and camp. And last year, I took them to the Democratic National Convention in Denver, Colorado to teach them about political action. Life is about friends enjoying the journey. And I have many friends and have many journeys, and here are a few that you might look at. Womb with a View on Maui in January with Kathy Jones of the Goddess Conference in England and Apella, Colorado, who lives on Maui. You can go to my website or my address and get information. And next year, if you really want to see Turkey, this is the deal. Because Rashid Erguner is the top person in Turkey. He wrote this book on the Trail of the Mother Goddess. That's how I got there. And we're going to all these places. You would get a real goddess, feminine, divine journey to Turkey. It is a bridge between cultures, the Western and the Muslim culture, and it's going to play a significant role in the next decades. So thank you. Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias, molto grazie. Dankeschön to the mothers and grandmothers and all the women and men who helped save Mother Earth for the next generations. A mother world is possible. Just do it.